What's up, familia? Welcome inside the hotel room. Hope you guys are doing good. Keep it between the lines. Got your load secure, man. You guys already see I got a special guest on here with me. I always find it a pleasure talking to this man. I'm talking about one Mr. Pastor David Rocha. Pastor, how you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. So you're in a is that the same hotel room you always get on Mondays?
You would think so, right? They're pretty similar.
Okay.
They're pretty similar. You see the writings on the wall. Some have some paintings. Some have. They all have some similarities. Yeah.
But do they already know you?
Some people, yeah. I've been doing it for so many years, and I know them too. And just as soon as they see me, they already pull up the account and they're like, "Okay, we got you, bam, in this room." They don't need to see my ID, depending on who it is. But for the most part, yeah, they already see me coming and they got the paperwork there for me just to sign. And
Yeah, I saw that you were toward Visalia.
oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean, that's not as far up as I am, but it's in this direction.
Yeah. We went up there. We went up there for a concert. Oh yeah.
I was glad to hear. I was glad to hear that you got embraced. You know, that's a good sign, man, because things have changed. That shows the change from the way it would have been in the 90s or even early 2000s.
It was a great time, and I give nothing but love and respect to everybody that showed me the love and respect. Everybody that came up to me and hey man, cool, we take a picture, and I'm like, yeah man, that's cool, man. And having some very good conversations
That's cool
with certain individuals, and I just shoot them nothing but love and respect. And I thank them. I did think about here and there, like, oh man, where am I going to the restroom? And things can happen, but that's anywhere. That can happen anywhere. It doesn't have to be in your own hometown, Guys,
but I mean, I appreciated hearing that you got embraced, because, as you know, many times I go down to Southern California, and I've always shown respect and gotten respect, and it's just it's a great feeling. It's a great feeling that you get what you put out. And I was really happy hearing that you got embraced and stuff like that.
Pastor, I don't know if I ever told you this, but that's what kind of tripped me out the first time I met you was at Rhodium Radio, Tony A's.
Yeah.
It was in Wilmington. And for those that don't know the area, Wilmington, Wilmington's pretty hood, man. Wilmington is where the ghetto meets the ocean. And we went out to eat. And Pastor, you just kind of, you were just kind of like free. Right, you're just kind of free. You weren't like, you weren't like that. You were just kind of free. You're just like, hey, I came here with a purpose, and we went out to eat afterwards. We sat outside, and I picked up on that. That was the first time for anybody who's watching. That's the first time Pastor and I ever met, and I picked up on that, and I'm like, man, this guy's just kind of free, because I mean, I'm from Southern California, but not from the Wilmington or Harbor area, and I'm kind of looking around a little bit like, hey, making sure everything's all right, but you're living pretty freely. And I'm like, I not to say that you were living carelessly, but just I saw something in that night, Pastor, and I'm like,
I didn't know that.
I want to live like that, man.
Yeah, and it's I don't want nobody to take it wrong. It's not like, oh man, these dudes ain't gonna do it. It wasn't that.
Right. Yes.
It was the peace of Christ. I know what God has called me to do, and I know that I'm gonna be on this earth for as long as He wants me to be on this earth. Jesus says, "Don't fear him who can kill the body, but him who can destroy the body and the soul." So I know that God's plans are for me to be here until He says so. And there's nothing I can do to change that. So I'm just gonna eat my burrito freely.
Pastor, let's talk about that. Every time I see you being interviewed or in a conversation or anything like that. You guys talk about certain things in your life, but I kind of want to talk about, and I got, I want to bring you back and have so many more conversations about the Bible and belief and everything, but kind of want to talk about you, Pastor.
Yeah.
You yourself, David Rocha. Um, I know a little bit about your story. I do watch your channel, and I'm not so sure if people really know a lot of the struggles that you went through. So, first and foremost, Pastor, I'm pretty sure everybody knows, but if you could just break it down to us, where'd you grow up and what was it with your parents? Together, not together?
No, my parents are together. I think they got married in 1961. They're still together. They're still alive. They're the same exact age. I think they just turned 80 this year. And I was the third out of four brothers. I don't have no sisters. Just brothers. I have two older brothers and one younger brother. And just growing up in Tracy, it's a small town. It was really tiny back then. There was only one high school, two middle schools, and then maybe four elementary schools. So everybody knew everybody. By the time you're a teenager, you knew everybody in the whole town because it was that small. It's different now. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, compared to a lot of big cities, it's small, but I think it's like 100,000 right now. But when I was growing up, I want to say it was like at 28,000. Yeah. So it's probably tripled now.
What was your relationship with your father? I remember hearing you say that he was an alcoholic, but what was your relationship with your father?
Oh, really good. My dad, my dad's mom died when he was a baby. And then my grandpa remarried and she didn't like my dad because, that wasn't her son. So unfortunately, my grandpa pretty much chose his wife over my dad, who was still a child, and so he didn't grow up very loved. And because of that, he made a promise that when he had children, he would love them, and so my dad has always been supportive. I mean, don't get me wrong, he was not somebody to mess with. I mean, I was scared if my mom would say, "Oh, I'll tell your dad," you know what I mean? But at the same time, though, I knew that even though my dad was a disciplinary in the house, we knew that it came from love. There was no question about that. To this day, if you watch our services and if you see somebody with a flag running across the worships in the beginning of service, that's my dad doing that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's a flag here and it says Jesus is Lord, and he grabs it and just starts running across. He got saved when I was 8 years old. He was an alcoholic though back then. Always drank, but didn't like. He was embarrassed. When my older brothers were teenagers, he would be embarrassed because he's like, I don't want my sons to follow in my footsteps, but he couldn't stop. He couldn't stop, and so when my dad got saved, it changed the whole household because the man is the head of his house. And most churches are filled with a Christian woman, and that's fine. But when the man changes his life, it changes the whole family. And that changed I believe, the whole direction. I think that I would have been a lot worse if my dad had not changed.
How about your mom? How'd your mom deal with your old man being, drinking all the time and being?
She didn't like it. I mean, but here's the thing: my dad was a functioning alcoholic. He worked. He worked hard. He was a farmer, and he worked sun up to sundown. Bills are always paid. We never had a lack of. I mean, don't get me. We were poor, but I didn't know we were poor. I didn't know any difference. Beans and rice were the normal thing to eat. I didn't know that was poor food. Or arroz con leche on the weekends. I didn't know that was poor food. And then because my dad was a farmer, we always had fruits or vegetables, whatever was in season. I mean, in buckets full. You know what I mean? So if it was peaches, we'd have buckets of peaches, buckets of cherries, buckets of asparagus, tomato, whatever was in season. I didn't know that I was poor. So my dad always provided, always. You know, so yeah, but he was an alcoholic.
You know what, Pastor? I'm so glad you said that. I'm so glad you brought that up. But if I tap into what you just said right there, this video is going to completely change in a different direction. But I will be making a video of that for dang
On
sure.
what?
You not knowing that you were poor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We'll save
Well,
that one.
I'll touch on it real quick. I didn't know I was poor either.
Yeah.
Until I got older and then look back and realize, and then yeah, because it's just your childhood. You don't know it.
I don't regret it though.
Yeah, you don't really know it. So but I don't want to get off track.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
But here, I
I'll
want to say
definitely make.
this though. I do want to
Yes.
say this. There's the things that my dad had, he took care of with pride.
Okay.
You know, it was a used car. He took care of it like it was a brand new car. Or we lived in a mobile home. I never had a house. We grew up in a mobile home that he still lives in, but you know, he prided himself in everything that he bought because he worked and sweated for that stuff, you know?
Now, I remember you saying that you learned how to shoot guns and everything because of him, because he taught you. So you
Yeah.
spend a lot of time with him.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, he would drink at home. So he
Right.
wasn't out with friends. He wasn't out, you know what I mean, being a womanizer. He was either working or he was at home, but he was drinking. And his friends would come over because he's the one that lived on a ranch. So
Mm.
it was easy for them to have a bonfire and drink and you know what I mean, out there in the country.
Hey, Pastor, how did you start getting into the gang life? If it sounds, outside of your dad drinking, it sounds like the house was pretty well structured, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there was a vice right there in alcohol, but you
Yeah.
said he gave his life to the Lord at 8 years old. How was it that the gang life came to you
I, I think it was two things. Well, actually, it's a handful of things, but I think the things that on top of my head, there was a couple of things that made a perfect storm. Let me say it like that. Number one was that my older brothers, this was in the peak of the whole cholo lifestyle.
Mm.
Okay, I did not know that to be a cholo, say in East LA, was to be a gang member. To me, it was a style because I saw my brothers, they weren't gang bangers, but they were wearing Dickies and t-shirts all pachucoed out, on Saturday night. So obviously that was like, wow. You know what I mean? I was just like, it just looks so, they like the way my brothers would iron with so much pride, you know what I mean? And to
Right.
me, it was the greatest thing, you know? Second though was Boulevard Nights. So that's when I combined the cholo with the gangs. And obviously as a kid, I'm like, whoa, you know what I mean? That's big VGV. I mean, I was just like blown away, right? And third, in Tracy, there was one black family in the whole town. Other than that, it was Chicanos and white people. And unfortunately, back then it was a different time, and they were very racist. The white people were the jocks. They had big trucks. They were the farmers' kids, and we were the farmers' workers. So when I was when I was young in kindergarten, first, second, third, I didn't. My parents didn't teach me race. I didn't know the difference. I didn't. I don't even remember seeing like, oh, that's a black kid, that's a white kid, that's a Chinese kid. I was just a kid. But then in fourth grade, those same kids um, started calling me wetback. It's like we went back from summer vacation. All of a sudden, I'm wetback. I'm a beaner, And I realize now that was learned. There was adults that taught them that because they were just fourth grade kids, and all of a sudden, I had to. There was only four Chicanos in my school, and one black kid, and everyone else was white.
Okay.
And each of us were getting bullied. And one day, I was embarrassed to tell my dad. I was really embarrassed because out in the country, I mean, my dad was like Superman to me. And he used to he my dad does not know a lot about history, but he'll be like, you know, he would tell me about Pancho Villa, and nobody will mess with Pancho Villa. He'll tell me about
Mhm.
Zapata. He would tell me, stories of Cesar Chavez and the farm workers and making things better for them. And so I felt like if I told my dad I was being bullied, like he was gonna be let down, somehow. And one day I noticed one of the Mexican kids getting picked on. The same white dudes. It wasn't everybody. Honestly, it was probably maybe 8 kids. So I'm not gonna say all the kids were racist, but
Mhm.
it was like these same 8, 10 kids would bully all us four Chicanos and the one black kid. So when I saw them doing it to them, um, I don't know how it happened, but I remember I wasn't even friends with them. And I remember telling them, "Hey, can I talk to you? Hey, can I talk to you?" And I had a little junta right there in the sandbox. And I said, "Hey, I see that you guys." I mean, I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember what I said. I was a fourth grader, but basically, I basically said, if we stick together, they won't do this to us. Each of us are getting bullied by ourselves, but if we stick together, if one person bullies us, they're gonna have to fight all 5 of us. And everybody said okay, and that next day, it's crazy because you think a fourth grader. I said, in the morning, let's all meet here at the sandbox. And on recess, let's meet here at the sandbox. And on lunch, let's sit in the same place in the cafeteria. And if they see us together, they won't mess with us. And so we did that. And a few of those guys tried bullying us, but then we would catch them alone and jump them. And after that they realized they couldn't do that no more. So it's weird because I didn't start gangbanging for the sake of another barrio. it
Mhm.
was it was racism. So it's kind of a long answer, man, but it was the dress style, Boulevard Nights, and this racism. And I think it made a perfect storm that by the time I reached my teen years, I was already angry. I was angry at the world, angry at anybody else that wasn't Chicano. Um, I didn't even want to gangbang against people in Tracy. I grew up where knew everybody. So I didn't believe in gangbanging against Northside Tracy, Southside Tracy. I'm just like, man, we're Tracy. We're just together. But then the movie Colors came out, and all of a sudden everybody wants to be a gang member. And it kind of caused Tracy to split up. And it's never been together ever since. And you kind of were forced to choose sides.
Yeah, I've said it before. That movie, I mean, it spread a wildfire just across the country, man. It really did. That movie, Colors, definitely had a major impact on the streets, man. Um, Pastor, so once it became a gang, by the way, what you just told right there, a lot of gangs that started pretty much have the same similar story, with the exception of some that started like high school football teams and stuff like that. But you
Yeah.
go back in the days, a lot of them have that similar story that you just told right there. So if you fast forward a little bit, and now you guys are a gang.
Yeah.
Um, what are your parents doing? What are they? What about your siblings? Are they in it? What are your parents? Are they like,
No,
hey, David, what are you doing?
my brothers were my oldest was 10 years older than me.
Okay,
So when I'm 16, the very influential age of gangs at 15, 16, he's 25, 26, married, working,
got it.
you know. My other brother, actually, unfortunately, my second brother got into drugs and was an alcoholic, so he wasn't paying attention to me. My little
Mhm.
brother was too little following in my tracks. And my mom, by this time, my mom had a job. Tracy had a Laura Scudder's potato chip factory. So she had got that job to help my dad. They're both Christian now. My dad's gone from sun up to sundown, and even on Saturdays. So he's pretty much not there to monitor me. My mom is a lot of it, she's working swing shift. So I'm getting home from school and she's gone and she doesn't come home till late. So basically me and my little brother became latchkey kids, you know, which I think is a huge problem because the minute mom and dad had to work, this is when our society started changing. Because when mom was home, there was somebody to keep us in check. That's besides the fact of if if the mom was even married to the dad, you know what I mean?
Mm.
That's a whole other thing of our whole generation was the one that started where the men were abandoning their women and kids were left to raise themselves. And okay, I was getting a call. Is it back? Am I back?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're
Okay.
back. You're
Yeah.
back.
So how is a mother gonna teach a boy how to be a man? You know what I mean? So,
Right.
but that wasn't my issue. My issue was more of a latchkey kid. So I started getting involved in this stuff without my parents even knowing.
Getting involved in the drugs and dealing drugs. Um
That was
what
later, yeah.
yeah, when you got involved with that, Pastor, were you like, yeah, I don't know about this, man? Or did your anger just, there was no rhyme or reason with you anymore? It was just like, ah, you know what? I don't care. Let's just do it.
Um, I grew up as a teenager, still I hated white people by the time I was a teenager.
Okay.
I hated police by the time I was a teenager. Um, I hated dudes from the other side of town by the time I was a teenager. And there was just a lot of hate, a lot of hate, a lot of anger. I think a lot of it carried over from just the racism throughout my town that just made me just have hate, you know? Um, and then I never even dawned on me about selling drugs. And then I got my girlfriend pregnant at the time. I was 17. So I wanted to do what my dad taught me is you get a job and take care of what's yours. So at 17, I marry her and go to the workforce and start working. I didn't have no skills. I didn't have anything. I had dropped out of high school. So I worked at a car wash, just drying cars. And then I went from there and I worked at a detail shop because the car wash, they fired me because they said I'm too slow. They're like, why can't you work like the paisas? You know, they said I was too slow. And I'm like, I'm working as fast as I can, you know? And so then I went to a detail shop, and then finally I got a job where I was commuting and things were good. So we were living in a little trailer behind my parents. I was married with a daughter, and I finally had a great job. Things were going good. She was working, you know, and we got a new car, not brand new, but it was like 3 years old, so it was new to us. Got ourselves into a little a duplex and everything was good, man. I had left the homeboys. Once in a while, I see them because I considered myself still part of the homies, but they respected. I had a daughter now. I was working. You know, back then it was different. You know what I mean? You respected a man for working and taking care of his kids back then. You
Yeah.
know, and but I still considered myself a homeboy. I would go and I'd see them on weekends, whatever. Anyways, one day it was a Friday. I was just, you know, loved my job, man, loved it, and I was where the UPS would come and get packages, and I was basically the shipping lead. And all of a sudden, my boss comes and he had a sad look in his face, and he basically says, "I don't know how to tell you this. I've been wanting to tell you this all week, but our company's moving. Here's your final check." You know,
Oh.
and I'm like, "What?" You know, I said, "I just got this car. I just got a duplex. I have a daughter." You know, and once again, I blamed the white people. You know, once again, because my boss, um, he was cool, but his main boss is the one that forced him to tell me. And his main boss was being a jerk to me. And I'm just like, see, that's what I get for trusting these people, you know? And I had a lot of hate, man. I never really talk about it now because it feels so distant from who I am today. But and I remember I went home and I went looking for work, couldn't find nothing. And then I went to visit a homeboy and he was breaking up a pound of weed, you know, and I've never smoked or done drugs. I think that you know that, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Can you let everybody know you've never done drugs or alcohol?
Never done drugs, never, I've never drank alcohol, beer, liquor, hard liquor, nothing.
Well, why is that, Pastor? Why do you think that is?
Um, had nothing to do with Christianity because I didn't become a Christian until I was 32. It had everything to do with seeing my mom crying because of my dad when he was an alcoholic. And my second oldest brother, remember I told you he got involved in drugs and alcohol. He was in and out of jail. He'd get DUIs. He went on a high-speed chase. The cops had to wreck into him to make him stop. Another time he hit a tree out in the country. His car exploded. He was passed out. If it wasn't for a rancher pulling my brother out, he would have burned alive. You know, and seeing my mom crying and seeing that, for me, I think as a kid, I saw alcohol as something bad. You know, and I saw my mom crying all the time, man. So I think by the time I was a teenager, um, I wanted nothing to do with that. I hated alcohol because of what it did to my older brother, and I just didn't want to be involved. And as far as drugs, um, me personally, I'm thinking back then, you know, this way I
Mhm.
thought is I thought people were weak that did drugs, that they couldn't cope, that they couldn't hang, and they wanted an escape. That's just the way, you know, that's the way I thought.
You know that, man, that is that is very strong minded. Because I would say this, Pastor, a lot of people that see what that see what you saw, right? The destruction of alcohol and drugs, what it did to their family. A lot of people follow suit,
Yeah.
right? It's like that. It connects the chain, right? It's the domino effect, and it makes sense what you're saying. That's what I'm saying. It makes perfect sense. It's like, hey, you see what it does, so I'm not gonna do it. But a lot of the times it doesn't work that way. A lot of times it's like I saw it, and even though I saw the destruction that it had with my parents, you know, my older siblings, whatever it is, I still go ahead and I do it, and it just kind of passes along. So that's why when you say that, I'm like, wow, you know, I'm glad it worked out that way because most people do, if their parents are alcoholics, a lot of times, not all the time, but a lot of times
Yeah.
they end up being alcoholics. Or if their
It's going to
parents are
go one
drug
way or the
users.
other. It's the same thing
Yeah.
with a child molester.
Yes.
If you're molested, chances are you're going to hate that or you're going
Mhm.
to do it. It's
Right.
going to go one way or the other. You
Mhm.
know, you're going to be an advocate against it or you're going to do it yourself. You know, um, I think it goes all the way down the line, no matter what, you know.
How do you go with kicking with your homies and everything? And you're a gangster, you're part of them, but I'm not gonna do any drugs, I'm not drinking with anybody, I'm not doing anything. A lot of the socializing has to do with alcohol. A lot of the socializing has to do, with getting high one form or another. I mean, you could kick it. A lot of matos just do kick it and don't do anything. But for the most part, a lot of socializing with the homies, there is something around.
All right, you there?
Yes.
Okay. Every time I get a call, it mutes the thing. So um I think that you know what, that's weird. I did have peer pressure, not a whole lot. Friends would sometimes, you know. I don't to be honest with you, I don't know. I don't know how other people see me. To this day, I don't know how other people see me. Because sometimes man, I hate to say it like this, but sometimes you can see people and say, this guy's a pushover. I can punk this dude. I can, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
Okay.
I hate to say it because even now I see that sometimes when I meet people. You
Mhm.
know, I'm just like, okay. And it's hard for me to respect. And but as a pastor, see what I mean? And sometimes I'm like, man, I wish I didn't have my street eyes that I have as a pastor because sometimes I see
Mhm.
right through people. Well, maybe that's what helps me, you know, but for whatever reason, um, the homeboys didn't really push me. I think there was a seriousness about me. Like, I didn't let them call me the B word.
Mhm.
Like, you are not going to say that to me. You know, and there are some friends that will say that to each other. They wouldn't say that to me. And I'm not saying I was a big, tough dude. I'm not the biggest, baddest dude. You know what I mean? I had friends they were nuts.
Mhm.
But I'm a true believer that the way you hold yourself, you demand respect. And I think somehow, some way, I had that as even a teenager. and as a young man, you know, because honestly, they didn't bother me that much in drinking or doing drugs.
Okay.
They would actually,
Okay.
a lot
Yeah.
of them would hide it from me.
Really?
Yeah. I
You
mean, not
know,
the drinking, but drugs. I didn't
uh,
know till later. As a pastor, they're like, "Oh man," and I used to, man, when we were at a party or whatever, I go to the bathroom and do lines. He goes, "Because I didn't want to do it in front of you because I was ashamed."
wow.
And I wasn't even a Christian or nothing, you know?
Right, right. You know, when you bring that up, I do think of one homeboy. His name was Dasm. What was his name? You know, Joe Dasm. And yeah, no, he didn't do anything. He didn't drink alcohol. He didn't do drugs. He still kicked it. He still, whenever we partied, he was there uh partying with us, but no alcohol and no drugs. And it was at some point it just became who he was and nobody pressured him.
Yeah,
Nobody
that's
said,
yeah. So
yeah,
I'm like,
nobody. I just thought of that right now as you were speaking. I was just like, yeah, man. You know, after a while, it's just like nobody put it in front of him. Come on, man. And nobody. It just became who he was.
I think another thing too was the fact that I did not want to be a gang. I didn't want to be in a gang. But once it became a gang, I was the one in the front. I was the one willing to ride. I was the one, let's go, let's do this. You know what I mean? So I don't know if that had anything to do with the way they saw me. Also, as I carried myself as a leader. You know, I don't know. I
Okay.
mean, again, we're talking teenagers and young adults. So, you know, I'm not saying this crazy veterano shot caller. I was a kid, you know, but nevertheless, I think that had something to do with it.
And your parents knew about you being from a gang?
Being what?
Your parents knew about you being in a gang
They
at the
figured it
time?
out. But by the time they figured it out, I was already married. I was 17 married, you know what I mean? 17 years old. So what are they going to do? You know, they didn't like it. They would worry, you know, but what could they do?
Yeah, young adult having or young having kids, man. That's something that was a big issue.
Yeah.
Pastor, how was that for you?
What's that?
How was that for you?
What's that?
Yeah, having a child at such a young age.
I mean, I think at the time, all my friends were having kids. So it was a normal
Yeah.
thing, I guess. Yeah. I mean, my daughter actually is on the worship team now. You know,
Okay.
this last Sunday, she's all the way to the left. That's my oldest daughter. Um, and man, it's the love of my life, man. You know, I love all my kids, and I have a relationship with all my kids. And um, you know, I had a great time. I think you know what I've always since she was a little girl, I used to call her my anchor. And she'd be
Mm,
like, "What do you mean?" When she was a teenager, "What do you mean, Dad?" I said, "You are my anchor that kept me from floating away so far in my life." I said, "Because every time I wanted to do something stupid, to do something dumb, I would think of you." I said, "And you helped anchor me, even though I ended up in prison, even though I ended up selling dope and selling crank." And I said, "Trust me, it would have been worse if it wasn't for you. You saved my life, mija." I told her all the time.
And that is where we're gonna leave it with part one. We'll definitely come back with a part two on Pastor David Rochas live. So just stay tuned for that one. We'll catch you guys on part two.